Today on the Crisscross Cinema Podcast, two tales of witchcraft and wizardry with vastly different visual vocabularies. Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone and Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban on the Crisscross Cinema Podcast.
Two fellows meet accidentally, like you and me. No connection between them at all, never saw each other before. They swap murders. Crisscross.
Wilson! I'm sorry, Wilson! A day may come when the courage of men fails. But it is not this day.
You gotta keep breathing, because tomorrow the sun will rise. Who knows what the tide could bring?
Hello, and welcome to the Crisscross Cinema Podcast, where we crisscross cinema history to find connections that elude the casual eye. Try and spot them along with us. Today we step into two tales of witchcraft and wizardry, but although these tales are told in a world other than our own, their creators are lowly muggles like ourselves with differing visions. Nowhere is this more apparent than today's two films, Chris Columbus's Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone and Alfonso Cuarón's Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. Hi, I'm Aaron Wilson, writer-director, and my favorite Harry Potter film is Prisoner of Azkaban.
I'm Mark Klobus, and I'm still dazzled by the magic of movies, even today.
I'm Stefan Strandy. It's hard to tell which Harry Potter is my favorite, but probably Goblet of Fire.
That's a good one. I like the dragons. Mm-hmm. And, Voldemort at the end, too.
What?
What? Oh, no. You didn't watch it all the way through.
I missed that part.
You should give them the spoiler alert first.
Okay, if you'd like to access bonus features and deleted clips from Crisscross and our sister show, Facets of Story, please support us on Patreon at patreon.com/transcendentertainment. That's TRANSCEND, entertainment. Today, just as always, we'll review our two films, and then we go crisscross to compare and contrast. But first, Mark, what media has apparated into your view?
Well, I just got back from a vacation, and I used some of the time on that vacation to enjoy two particular items of media. One is that I started getting caught up on Star Trek Lower Decks, and that was a cartoon that I had avoided because I felt it was a little too, the concept just seemed a little too silly for something that I had a certain amount of reverence for, and yet the more I get into it, the more I enjoy it. And so I was binging that on the trip. I was also, though, reading Edward Ashton's Mickey 7. And this is something that my son encouraged me to do because of the upcoming Bong Joon-ho movie that's due to be released, I believe, next year. And I'm trying to do this thing where I read the novels for the films that I see before I see them. And it was interesting. I mean, it's not a terrible novel, but at the same time, I'm really curious to see what a filmmaker of his caliber does with this material, because I feel like it just doesn't strike me. It's like I read the novel, I'm like, okay, I can see this as like a sci-fi project or maybe even kind of a low rent movie, but to give it to someone like Bong Joon-ho, who is Oscar-winning filmmaker. I imagine it will be significantly different from what I read. How about you, Stefan?
I just finished up season 3 of The Bear. I don't know if you guys seen it.
I've seen a few episodes with my brother. It's pretty good.
Yeah, it's pretty top tier as far as like writing and cinematography goes. Mm-hmm. This season, I feel kind of dipped in quality just for the sake that, I mean, not much really happened. Like, to me, it just kind of felt like the epilogue of season 2. Mm-hmm. And it was also like half a season disguised as a full season. Oh, yeah. Like, the ending was like, for part 2, wait till next year. I was like, okay. I guess that's cool. But, it made me feel things, as it tends to do.
As good media should.
I was crying. I was happy. I was a bit angry at times.
In the fetal position.
Yeah. I was having a panic attack every so often. But, yeah.
Yeah, I was watching that right after work one day. I'm like, I do not want to be watching this right after work.
Yeah.
Anyway, but Yeah, so what I've been watching is I watched several things trying to find something that hit me for this one, but what I eventually landed on was a documentary called Lucy and Desi about Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz, and it was really cool. Like, I mean, of course, everybody knows the Lucy Show version of it, but the behind the scenes, their relationship, it went in a lot about his background of coming from Cuba, and like he was completely cut off from going there for obvious reasons, and so he was left with this feeling of not really having a home, and their relationship as the Desilu, their production company, was getting bigger, kind of got worse as both of them were kind of becoming workaholics. Him having to be the running the company and doing all that, and she's constantly rehearsing, trying to get her stuff perfect, and that was really her strength. Of she didn't think about herself as funny, but where she was really strong is just rehearsing and getting it perfect. So
that's really interesting, because when I was growing up, she was sort of seen as the grand lady of American television comedy. I'm thinking that it's kind of the role that Carol Burnett inhabits today, this legendary figure who did this.
And she was actually in the documentary, Carol Burnett,
because she was such a she was such a fan of Lucille Ball, and really spent a lot of her career, acknowledging that and paying great respect to her for it.
Yeah, and on a small scale, like I can see that with like running my YouTube channel. Like I see a lot of YouTubers like really get into the view chasing, and like it just takes over their entire life. Mm-hmm. And if it were like that for me, I wouldn't see any reason for doing it. Like it's really just a passion project, but it is just a side thing at this point. But anyway, so yeah, that's what we've been watching. Just like always, we'll be diving deep. Fair warning, here there be spoilers. And now our review of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone.
The movie opens up on Privet Drive, where we see this berobed man with long white hair and a long white beard extinguishing the streetlights. He sees a cat who he speaks to as though the cat were human, as so many cat owners do. But it turns out this cat is indeed a human. It transforms into Professor McGonagall, played by Dame Maggie Smith. And already we're seeing just the caliber of actors that were brought into this project, because you have Maggie Smith acting alongside Richard Harris. And that's one of the things that always fascinated me about the whole Harry Potter film franchise, was all the big guns they bring in. Yeah. For even the small roles. Yeah,
basically every big British actor is in Harry Potter. It's almost like Star Trek for America. Or, well, I don't know if that's... All the actors are in Star Trek. I don't know if they would be big actors, but...
The interesting limitation is that and this apparently was from J.K. Rowling, she insisted no American actors, and the person apparently who was really crushed by that was Robin Williams. Oh, he wanted to do Hagrid. He wanted to do one of the roles in Azkaban, and Rowling was insistent that it just be British or Irish actors.
He would make a good Peeves. They cut him from the movie, but
yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, he would have made an excellent piece. He could have even done just a cameo as one of the portrait figures, because they tend to have people who were, like Dawn French plays the fat lady in the third one, and she's this legendary figure of British television, but she, but it's kind of like a 2-second role practically. So
yeah,
but we see in this scene that the McGonagall and Dumbledore are referring to these events that have occurred without much detail. She asks, "Are the rumors true?" And Dumbledore says, "Yes, for better and for worse." And they're waiting for someone to arrive, and it's Hagrid, played by Robbie Coltrane, who
and there's a line right before Hagrid comes where he's like, "Would you really trust Hagrid with this?" And he's like, "I trust Hagrid with my life." And I'm like, "Is Dumbledore a mob boss?"
Oh, by the way, he's late.
Yes.
I should add, by the way, that Richard Harris is a Crisscross podcast alum. We seen him already in Unforgiven.
Oh, right. Yeah,
Yes.
Forgiven.
And I have to say, his performance in this role is a little lower energy than it was in that one.
Yeah,
He's playing
just a
English
little
Bob. So, but Hagrid comes bearing a baby whom they just leave on the doorstep of one of the homes. Apparently that's a thing. We're just going to go ahead and dump babies on doorsteps. Then we jump ahead 10 years and we meet Harry Potter. The career-making performance by Daniel Radcliffe, who is sleeping in the cupboard under the stairs in his Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon's house. And we see right off the bat that he is an afterthought in the family. That Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon, give all their love and attention to their spoiled son Dudley. And it's not just the fact that Harry's neglected. There's a certain wariness about him, and you see that with that line where Vernon, played by Richard Griffiths, says to him, "No funny stuff." He's clearly he clearly has some distrust for Harry. He's suspicious of Harry somehow, and we see why, because they go to the zoo. And while they're at the zoo, Harry discovers, one, he can somehow communicate with the Burmese python that's there. And two, he's able to make the glass enclosure disappear and reappear. So he makes the glass disappear, the snake gets out.
You're a magician, Harry.
Yes. So there's this interesting thing that his aunt and his uncle nonetheless insist that he suppress. That they seem to know more than they let on, and that becomes clear when one day a letter arrives for Harry, and as soon as Uncle Vernon sees where it's from, he refuses to allow him to read it. But then another envelope is delivered by an owl, no less, and then another comes, and we get this montage of where the family is being inundated with owls delivering letters until there is this practical wave of letters that washes into the house on a Sunday, no less, when they should be delivering the post. So Vernon announces he's going to take the family on a holiday, and they go to the remotest hut they can find on the British Isles, which is a pretty remote hut. But on the night of Harry's 11th birthday, a visitor arrives in the midst of a storm. And who is that visitor? It's Hagrid. And he's there to take Harry to Hogwarts. And this is when we get this info dump.
Well, before the info dump, I just want to jump back a little bit. So when they leave him on the doorstep, it's like, we'll tell him when he's ready, or we'll let him know when he's ready. When he's ready is 11 years old. It's like,
yeah. Well, that's when that your typical privileged English schoolboy is sent off to the public school to have that wonderfully warping experience of living with others and being monitored by elder kids and his teachers, and his parents have nothing to do with it. You would think that Vernon and Petunia would want this to be rid of Harry, but it's the magic thing that bugs them.
I always thought about that. Like, if they didn't like him that much, like, why wouldn't they want to get rid of him quicker?
Yeah.
I think it's pretty
They
clearly
just hate magic so much that they don't want another person joining it.
And there's this resentment that you see between Petunia and her sister Lily, who's Harry's mother, and that comes out. And Fiona Shaw does a really nice job of again another example of a great actress who she has barely 5 minutes of screen time.
Yeah.
But she is one of those ones who really tries to make the most of it. You get that.
She's spot on comedically, too. Like the part where the glass disappears and he falls in. She's like, ah! She's just like losing her mind.
Yeah.
And she does such a great job with the bitterness about how she sells the idea that Lily was the privileged one. Lily was the apple of her parents' eye. And whereas Petunia... And they never really make this explicit in the movie, but it's not that she's a muggle. She's a squib. And because Lily has the magical skills, I think it's a pureblood family. But because one of the things that they never refer to Harry as being a mudblood. For all the insults they dump on Harry, he's never a mudblood. So, so you get a sense that you get a hint from not just the dialogue, but from her performance about how, Lily was probably favored because she had the magical ability. And whereas, Petunia is neglected, she's made a life for herself. She apparently has this good relationship with Vernon. She has this wonderful son who doesn't have a lick of magic in him. And so, but she's so bitter about the fact that of what Harry represents.
Yeah. And they introduced the whole no magic thing with Uncle Vernon, where he's like, there's no such thing as magic. And I'm like, okay, so I didn't remember Uncle Vernon being such a magic denier, but it's I guess it comes from.
Did Vernon know that about magic, or was it just Petunia? Did Petunia talk to Vernon about it?
I got the impression, I got the impression from how it was structured, and it's been a while since I read the novels, but I get the impression that he did know, and they were sort of telling Harry to suppress it without telling him to suppress it. They were just hoping that they could somehow intimidate him into withholding it. And there's an element that Rowling goes into, and I have to say the world building that she does in the novels is really impressive, which is I think one of the reasons why it's a little disappointing she hasn't done more with it than she has. I mean, yes, we have 7 novels plus the play, plus Fantastic Beasts, which didn't quite work out as well as we would have hoped.
Yeah. I was just thinking about that this morning of didn't Harry become an Auror? Wouldn't it that'd be kind of cool to see a police procedural
with amazing.
Harry Potter in it?
Yeah, the only problem is that unless you could somehow convince Daniel Radcliffe to do it, I don't think the audience would accept it.
Yeah, well, I mean, even a book, whatever form it would take, but yeah.
Well, they're remaking them for HBO as a TV show.
Yeah.
Which is kind of interesting.
Yeah,
to add more details.
Yeah, that's probably the most interesting thing about it. They can be more faithful to the books. But.
Although, I think this is something I'm going to get to in the crisscross. I don't know if that's necessarily such a good thing.
Yeah, so. I'll get there too.
Yeah. But we also learn Harry also learns this time that his parents didn't die in a car accident like he's been told. They were wizards, and that they had been killed by a dark wizard, whose name he isn't told because we are not allowed to speak his name. So we get this great sequence where we're introduced to the wizarding world. Hagrid takes Harry to London. They go to Diagon Alley. We see him stacking up on school supplies. They have John Hurt, the amazing John Hurt, in this one scene role as the wand maker, Mr. Ollivander, which is again an example. It's like you're using you're firing cannons to kind of send out a sound signal. It's just amazing how overloaded with talent this one is, and Hurt's one of those ones who just really just throws himself into that role so well.
Yeah.
But we also learn about Gringotts. We learn that Harry's actually, from a wizarding perspective, he's wealthy. But we also see that Hagrid's picking up a mysterious item. Ooh, Chekhov's item. Is it Chekhov's? No, it's not Chekhov's item. It's MacGuffin.
It's both of those things.
It's both.
Because
it's
a setup for later, but it's also the MacGuffin.
We'll call it the Chekhov's MacGuffin.
Yeah, it works.
So he stocks him on school supplies, and then Hagrid just dumps him off at King's Cross. And I have to say, that's kind of one of those ones where it's like, Hagrid is, and to be fair, he's not really meant to be the most effective, competent person in the wizarding world. So he has to figure out how to get to not platform 9, but platform 9 3/4. But fortunately, he overhears Molly Weasley, who is talking about Muggles, and her kids are talking about Muggles. So she knows, hey, guess what? These people are apparently wizards themselves, and so that's how he gets to platform 9 3/4 and gets the Hogwarts Express. And on board the train, he meets for the first time Ron Weasley, played by Rupert Grint, and Hermione Granger, played by Emma Watson. And we start to see the relationship building between them. Now, this is, I think, one of my favorite things about the series is how the relationship between those three develop. And I'll be honest, I have not seen, until we did this, I had not seen any of the films beginning to end.
Oh, really?
Really. I mean, I'd read the novels, although I will, confess I was a latecomer to them. But one of the things I was struck by is how so much of the series depends upon the connection, kind of the evolving relationship between the three. And you see a lot of that groundwork is done, and you could, I think, question this, when the three actors are at their most unformed. Ratcliffe had done, I think, stage. He'd done David Copperfield. Rupert Grint, Emma Watson, they were also very novice. And one of the things people talk about is their acting gets so much better as the series gets along. And I mean, it's not terrible here, but they're not, they're not like, a young Kurt Russell or young Shirley Temple, for whom it just seemed to come naturally. Or
I was even noticing in the third one, I'm like, the acting is not as good as I remember it.
Yeah. but I mean, you compare the third and the first, and their acting skills
leaps and bounds better. Yeah.
So,
but I think that kind of like adds to it, like having kids that are like actual kids. It just kind of like makes it more real.
Yeah.
In that sense.
Of course, it also creates that ticking clock you have when you're doing the series about how you got to get these things out before.
Yeah, we got to go.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah. You could tell, like, between the first and the second one, like, Dan's voice drops, like, 2 octaves. Like, what the heck happened here?
There's a line in the first one where you can hear his voice drop.
Oh,
and it's like,
Yeah.
Okay, I want to jump back to Diagon Alley really quick.
Yeah.
So there's the music that plays in Diagon Alley reminded me of Hook, but it also reminded me of like the Christmassy music from Home Alone. So anyway, like you can.
Did Williams do both of those?
Yeah, he did both of those ones. So it's interesting how there's some composers where it's really obvious where they're just blatantly copying their own stuff. But
it's their calling card.
Yeah, but Williams, like you can hear the same. It's not exactly copied, but you can hear the same sounds and in it. And then I have a question for you, Stefan. In the flashback to Voldemort killing his parents, there's a look to those shots that I think I know how they got, but tell me if I'm wrong. Is it a combination of slow shutter speed and slow motion, or low shutter speed and slow motion?
I feel like it's probably more shutter speed than anything else. I don't know if it was done in camera, if they did it like in the edit, but it probably was in camera just because they shot this in 2000. Yeah. But yeah, I think it was more like just low shutter. It could be slow. They probably slowed it down in post.
There's some shots that are, well, I think all of it is slow motion because him walking up to the gate is like smooth, and then especially the shots of the baby where he's got like those really slow expressions. I think that's slow motion, but
yeah, I'm not sure.
When we get to Hogwarts, we also get the other relationship that you see throughout the series, which is when the three meet the snobbish Draco Malfoy for the first time, played by Tom Felton, another Crisscross podcast.
He probably had more experience than any of them.
Yeah. Oh yeah, he was older too. I think
that's true.
But he does such a great job from, and I think it's just because he definitely seems to be the most polished from the start.
Yeah,
and he instantly sells. He's so easy to hate.
Potter.
It's this thing where I felt bad for him, and I think I mentioned that when we did Rise of the Planet of the Apes, is that he seems to be stuck playing these, the
villain characters.
These villain characters.
Weaselly, slimy.
Yeah, exactly. Although this one, he's the leader, and he's got his lackeys.
That's true.
Crab and Goyle, or Grab and Coil, or whatever.
Grab the coil.
They're really interchangeable, and they never really develop those characters. But even though one of them ends up playing a big role in the seventh story in final movie, but that doesn't matter. But I love how efficient the scene is, where they establish so many of the dynamics. How Draco is just going to be a jerk to Ron because Ron's poor. So it's not even like a magic thing. It's just, you're poor, your family is magic trash, and how that instantly puts Harry off because Ron's the first friend he's made. And so I love how I do is Draco's like, stick with me and I'll tell you, who you want to be with. And Harry says, I can figure that for myself.
I think I got this.
It's nicely sold. So
I just want to touch on, before we get into Act 2, just the structure. Act 1 is packed for this one, because they've got all of this, tons and tons of setup of what is this world, what is Harry's background, everything.
They're having to do a lot of heavy lifting, not just for this movie, but they're setting the stage for all the movies.
Yeah, the whole series. Yeah,
and as we were pointing out, I mean, Rowling hadn't even completed writing the series at this point, and yet they have to basically set up something that's going to carry the load for films they aren't even fully aware of what they're going to look like.
Yeah, and it kind of starts to show later in the series, that would have been nice to set that up earlier.
Yeah, for sure.
Exactly. I mean, Rowling apparently had a lot of it anticipated, and I was reading some notes about how that reflected how her input into the third film, where she felt that they were getting a little too ahead of where she wanted them to be with the third film. But yeah, I mean, it's still very much, but there's so much lifting that they're doing there. You're absolutely right. And I'm surprised they didn't do more info dumps of the kind that you get with Hagrid at the cabin.
Oh yeah, the screenwriting's good, and they do a great thing of they make scenes do multiple things at the same time. You're going to see that coming up with the classroom scenes, because it's basically just as a classroom scene that serves no point to the story. But I mean, it's kind of the Harry Potter stuff that has to happen, but they also do things in those scenes to make it serve a purpose for the plot.
And I think they really had to. And this is something that, again, I'm anticipating the crisscross, is that, and this is where I really do not envy what the task they had with this movie, because you do something that for which there is such a fervent fan base, and the question of how you translate that, because you have to make these choices because a book is not a movie, and if you do the frame by frame thing like HBO Max seems to be planning to do with these reboots, it's will that really work as visual entertainment?
And more storytelling wise, you lose the structure of it. Books are much more loosely structured. They're just, they kind of are allowed to do a little bit more dilly dallying. Let's venture into this place a little bit, and then we'll go over here. But with movies, they're so short that you've got to be right on it when you're.
And then the flip side, of course, is if you leave things out or you change things, you're going to have fans who are like, "That's not what I remembered. How dare you!" You get the angry letters and the upset, reviews and all that. So is this when we transition to the second act?
Yeah. So right when they get to Hogwarts, I think is
because they're still doing the info dump. I mean, this is when we learn about the Sorting Hat and the four houses.
Yeah, there may still be. We'll see.
The whole movie is an info dump.
I don't necessarily disagree with you, but it feels like again there's.
It might be when classes start. I don't know. I wasn't paying that close attention.
But they're still doing things like they're introducing the house ghosts, and this is where we get
which John Cleese.
Cleese.
Oh my goodness,
what a throwaway.
He's wasted in this movie.
Yeah, honestly.
Yeah, it's one of those. Maybe he was a fan, or maybe they just showed up with some money and were like the comical bag of cash and waved in front of his face. Because I imagine John Cleese is probably strapped for money. How he probably has only made just chump change off Monty Python.
Yeah.
So
struggling artist.
But we get the Sorting Hat, and it's interesting because I went back and I reread the book after I saw the movie, and it's so much more structured in terms of how they did it alphabetically. So you start with you're marching through them, and I get why they couldn't do this because, again, efficiency. But it feels like that they're just constantly bouncing back and forth. So instead of like, student, Granger, Hermione, student, Potter, Harry, student, Weasley, Ron, it's like, okay, we're going to have, okay, now it's Hermione's turn, and now it's Harry's turn, now it's Draco's turn. It's like, well, I just guess they're just kind of, we're just going to go ahead and now your turn. Just pulling them out from the audience like it's a game show or something. So, but we also start getting introduced to the teachers. We see Dumbledore, we see McGonagall, and we also see Severus Snape, played by the transcendent Alan Rickman.
Yeah.
Who,
he's basically the antagonist of this movie.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he's like he's the antagonist of the series, and what Rowling does with him, and what Rickman does. I mean, it really is, to me, even more than the Harry Potter character, the spine that holds all this together. Mm-hmm. That what he does, because
you're talking about the whole series.
The whole series. Again, I haven't seen the whole series in the movies, but I've seen enough clips of it, and I've of course read the novels, to where I that transition that he does, and it's not like an evolution. It's like it's always there, and you can and they explain it later on, but he is someone you love to hate, but at the same time, he's not a hateful person. You can see within it that there is a certain dignity, I think, that really comes from Rickman's performance. Mm-hmm. And that's really the reason why I find it difficult. I can see so many roles being recast. It is so difficult to imagine how they're going to replace Rickman.
Yeah. I have no idea.
I'm not looking forward to that part.
Yeah. I almost want to see just. Can you imagine the poor person?
Oh, I've got an idea.
What?
What is the guy's name? The guy who played Kylo Ren.
Adam Driver.
Yeah, Adam Driver.
Yeah.
He would be all right.
That would be good.
Well, he would be. I mean, you can get actors to do it, but it's one of those things where, I mean, when you have such a beloved actor, who gave such an iconic performance. I mean, it impressed me how easily they were able to replace Harris with
Gambon.
Mm-hmm. Gambon, mm-hmm. Who and I'm going to be a heretic here. I actually think I enjoyed Gambon's performance in the third movie more than I enjoyed Harris's in the first. And I know a lot of fans consider that sacrilege.
I feel like the way that Harris played it was like just by the script. Like he just hit the Dumbledore notes, but he didn't really go any further than that.
But he's such a sweet old man.
Yeah, that's true.
He's much more calm than how Gambon does it.
They wrote him in number 4 to be a maniac.
But things, again, I went back and I read it, and there's a whimsy to Dumbledore that Rowling has in the character that is totally lost in Harris's performance. Yeah. I mean, there's this moment in the novel where he goes, I'm going to say some words. He just says some nonsense words, and it's this kind of the sense of person who, he takes his job seriously, but he doesn't take himself seriously. You never get that from
that's true.
Harris's
performance. You get more of just like a kind grandpa. You don't really get like silliness or
He is, especially when
it's kind of like the difference between actual Yoda and the Yoda that Luke first meets. Whereas Dumbledore from the books is basically the Yoda that Luke first meets on Dagobah.
Yeah. Although from the start he's the teacher anyway. So but you see, you get the introduction to Snape. You get him having that that he's got it out for Harry. It's and Gryffindor.
This is kind of the transition into Act 2. Mm-hmm. I wrote in my notes like not a strong transition because there's not really a goal. It's just like, okay, go to school, have classes. So the first half of Act 2 is just really loose, and then it's not till the midpoint when they find out about the Sorcerer's Stone that the plot kicks in.
Well, Philosopher's Stone.
Yeah,
but we're dumb Americans.
We're American folks here.
If it's Philosopher's Stone, it could be too thinky for us. So, I kind of felt that the story, the goal in the second act seemed to be Harry settling into the wizarding world.
Yeah,
and
Quidditch really seemed to take a big part of the. I mean, it's kind of a subplot, but it took a lot of the first half of Act 2.
And it really is a fun aside. It's like the most uncomplicated part of the wizarding world for Harry, and it's something where, of course, he's a natural. we talk about him being, the savior. He's kind of the almost like the Christ-like figure for the wizarding world because they know that he's going to beat Voldemort. They believe he is. Mm-hmm. But here's something he enjoys. He just proves to be a natural at it. And they're all just and the thing is that that's where the name Harry Potter is kind of this unattainable thing. He's done this thing that people cannot get their head around, but they can relate. They can appreciate. Well, everyone loves Quidditch, and so it turns out Harry Potter's one of us. and of course, the fact they do it through Malfoy harassing Neville Longbottom and Harry trying to step in and do something about that. How it turns what Harry thinks is going to be his expulsion into McGonagall saying, "I found you a seeker."
Yeah, they did a great job with subverting your expectations.
You should be suspended, but how about I promote you?
Exactly. So
it kind of happens at the end of the movie. Too,
every movie. You just broke every law in the school, but you know what?
And that's where you can also relate to that sense that Snape has where that really gets developed later on in the series about how Harry Potter is just, he's kind of like Dursley in his own way. I mean, I think his experience living with them has made him humble, but I can appreciate Snape's like, Dumbledore's basically, throws himself at bends all the rules to help out Harry Potter. In Azkaban, we'll see how Cornelius Fudge takes this rule. I mean, the Minister of Magic basically says, "Oh, I know you used magic," and
don't worry about
and this
that.
woman is probably at this point, dead from, floating into space, but
They popped her. They got her back.
Exactly. So we'll let bygones be bygones. It's like, really? Do the rules even apply to Harry Potter? And that's where kind of, especially given the fact, how as we see later in this series, the relationship between him, the triangle between him and Lily and James, and how that plays out. But we're getting really ahead of ourselves. We also, though, see and this is something I do like is that the path to the friendship between the trio, between Harry and Ron and Hermione, is not a smooth one. Mm-hmm. And I have to say, of the three, I think Emma Watson's the best actor at this point. Mm-hmm. And because she does such a good job of playing that bratty little know-it-all. Yeah.
I think the reason why that is because she's closest to her actual character. And she's talked about that, how she was very much like her character, where, well, yeah, I can't speak to the other two, but like that's, yeah.
It's also one where she is the most like Harry Potter in the sense that she has discovered relatively late that she is, in magic. And like Harry, she has this passion for it. She's just so excited. Mm-hmm. And it's something that involves books, and she could master it, and she's special, and she's wonderful, and her enthusiasm for it is just so authentic in it. So she's saying there, she constantly has her hand up in class, and of course Ron, who has grown up with magic, for whom it's more ordinary, and so for him, it's not something that he really throws himself into. It's something. I mean, he enjoys it. He's part of the wizarding world, but at the same time, he hasn't studied, and that's so obvious. So Hermione, when they're doing the charms class, and Hermione succeeds and Ron does not, and so Ron's out walking out of the class, and he's mocking her and saying she has no friends, and of course she hears it, and she really sells the notion of an 11-year-old girl who is still new to this world, and she has no friends, and it's just horrifying. Mm-hmm. But then we get Quirrell, the Defense Against Dark Arts instructor, announcing that a mountain troll has breached the defenses and is in the building. Everybody's panicking, and we see Hermione and Harry and Ron all fighting it off, and that's when they bond. And it's I mean, CGI is a little jinky, and we'll get that.
They've got some CGI Harry in there that they thrash him about a lot to hide that he's CG.
Yeah, you can really tell, especially in the Blu-ray. Yeah. Like, you could see exactly when they switch them out. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean,
it's not great.
I have to say, though, that looks like high quality special effects compared to the Quidditch game.
Oh my gosh, Quidditch was awful.
Yeah.
I think it's just the movement of the brooms. And
Just like all the people in the sky, like if you pause it, like you can definitely tell that those are like CGI like stick figures.
Yeah, and it's like blur, 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 and it's not
Close up of Harry.
it's not like blur of motion. It's kind of like, we're not going to fully pixelate this.
Yeah,
It is just so awful.
it's like PS2 quality.
Oh yeah, or I would actually go with Atari quality.
Oh yeah,
So,
it's a little smoothed out, but
yeah. Okay, let's. I'll move.
there's
it
a
up to
few more
Nintendo.
polygons.
at least it's 3D.
Yeah,
Yeah, but it's just, oh my god, it's painful to watch, especially given the fact that you want to see what it is that makes Quidditch this thing that all the the wizarding world loves, and instead all we get is whoosh 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 whoosh. Yeah, it's just
it's still iconic though.
Oh, it
like
is.
the imagery of it.
Oh, it is, and I think this is one where Rowling's writing really sets a higher bar than they were really able to pull off with the time that they had.
Yeah.
And that's one of those things where, is it bad CGI because they don't have the technology to make it work, or is it bad CGI because they had a deadline, and when you get close to that deadline, you're just finishing get it out there.
I think this is a good time to visit the special effects of the visual effects of the ghosts. Like they're just kind of, you can see them like it's got very much that flat feeling of they just feel like they're putting some turning in there to make it look like, oh, it's more dynamic, but it's very much just looks like flat layers that are being pushed through 3D space.
And I think that's gets to my grievance with this movie, which is the fact that they just kind of felt like it felt like it was homework for so many people. And it wasn't just for some of the actors. I mean, I thought Robbie Coltrane's performance, for example, was very flat, but it also felt like that with the special effects people. Oh, we're doing another blockbuster. Okay, let's do this. There wasn't a sense that these people were necessarily fans. We're trying to, in the same way that, fan art tries to conceptualize something and they try to get it just right to realize their vision. It's kind of like, well, we're going to do it, and, it looks good enough on the screen. Okay, let's do the next frame.
I'm going to play devil's advocate here, and like, they were building this world from the ground up to begin with. Like this is the giant that the rest of the series has to stand on its shoulders. So anyway, a lot of stuff is going to be janky, but
yeah.
But
I mean, again, one of the things the fact they did all this in the span of a year, I kind of, and this is something I think we'll get to in the comparison, is that when you consider the 18 months they spent on some of the later films, I think is part of that difference that you see between the early ones and the later ones. They simply put the time into it. So maybe because they were getting criticized for the junky CGI. But Harry managed to overcome the bad CGI to win his first Quidditch match, which makes him a hero. But because the Dursleys don't want him, he stays at Hogwarts for the holidays, and this is when we start to see him.
Okay, let me add. Sorry, before we leave the Quidditch, I really liked I'd forgotten about this part. The part where he kind of rides his broom like a surfboard or whatever. He steps on it. I don't know. That part was cool. I wasn't really paying attention to the CG ground or whatever at that point. I was just the perspective of those shots and how they played that, I thought was cool.
Yeah.
And I do have to give Daniel Radcliffe props there, because as challenging as it must have been to act, to even do so with the CGI, the green screen, I mean, to be able to have that ability to visualize and do it right, that probably was not easy for him at all. And yet that was like the one part of the scene I didn't really have an issue with. Maybe I was too distracted by the bad CGI. But he seemed to fit in there. It didn't feel like he was just kind of staring off and trying to connect with it. So, but we see him beginning to investigate this mystery of this object that there's all these references to. We know that there's a 3-headed dog that's guarding a trap door, who the trio sees very briefly. He also sees Snape threatening Quirrell. So we have this idea that there is a that there is that there's something bigger that's going on around them.
And at this point, Harry's actively suspecting Snape that he's the one that wants to steal the stone. So,
yeah, and of course, the suspicion comes out at the Quidditch match. I didn't go detail about this, where Harry's broom is not functioning properly, and Hermione, I think it is, or is it Ron, who sees that Snape is doing some sort of chant. They figure it's a curse, so Hermione has to distract him by setting his robe on fire and all that. So there was, but I don't know about you, but I felt no suspense about it. And it's not just I didn't read it. It's just that there didn't seem to be real suspense about Snape being the bad guy. I didn't feel like they did the work to really set it up as a misdirection. It's kind of, we were supposed to assume that because Snape was had it out for Harry, that's what it's about.
I'm trying to remember, like, the first time I saw it, I was like 7 years old, and I never really I didn't like Snape. I didn't think he was like the big bad of the movie. Like, I didn't really know anything about Harry Potter when I saw it. I definitely didn't think Quirrell was the bad guy, but
yeah, and that they actually include Quirrell in every place that Snape is at when he's doing his mischief.
Oh,
so like they have a shot for Quirrell in each one of them. I guess is kind of a hint.
But I like the fact that Ian Hart, who plays Quirrell, does it in a way to where he is trying to be unobtrusive. And that's not, bad acting. He doesn't have the ability to, go, to sort of measure up to Rickman's presence. He's deliberately doing that because that's within character. And I thought that was nicely done. So, again, I think this is the value of having such quality actors that when they know when to bring it and when not to, and they're not, competing with each other.
Yeah. And for storytelling wise, like in mysteries, this is called fair play, to have Quirrell be there every time this happens, so you're not cheating. You've got the suspect there so that you can figure it out before it comes to the end. But.
And that's really Rowling, because she does it in the novel. And
true.
The Harry Potter movies are like very simple mysteries, basically. They're like, this one very much has the feeling of kids' first mystery.
Yeah, that's true.
But,
yeah. And that is, I think, it'd be interesting to compare that with, say, other more orthodox mysteries directed toward kids, like Harry Potter, not Harry Potter, Hardy Boys, Nancy Drew, and seeing if you have that same level of mystery in terms of how it's presented to kids. So, but we do have clues, and we do have the trio working through the clues, and they figure out that Fluffy is guarding this thing called the Sorcerer's Stone.
Yeah. And my favorite way that they find out stuff, though, is that scene with Hagrid where he just keeps saying stuff and he's like, I should not have said that. I should not have said that.
And of course, at one point, I'm kind of thinking to myself, but if you didn't say it, how are we going to advance the plot? He seems to be much more in terms, he's not so much a fully realized character as he's kind of a plot device unto himself. He delivers the baby, he retrieves Harry, he dispenses these nuggets of information at just the right moment. And then, of course, he's the key to, how to get past Fluffy, because he lets out, that you can basically lull Fluffy to sleep. But before we get to that, we find that there's apparently this problem in the woods. These unicorns are being attacked, and that there's a creature feeding off their blood. And Harry and Draco see it, and I love how, again, Tom Felton does such a great job, and he's like this, privileged kid bitter about the fact he gets punished for for turning in the trio for being out late, even though he saw that because he was out late. How dare he be punished for being a snitch? And so but then we see Harry confronting the figure who I guess is supposed to be Snape in his mind, but gets chased off by is it Firenze, the centaur.
Ferenz, I think.
Ferenz. Yeah.
And it's interesting. I forgot he was in this movie because I remember the centaurs being in the 5th one.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm like, I'd forgotten. Anyway, I'd forgotten how much stuff they set up for the later books.
He was one of those characters that showed up like more often in the books, but they just never really brought him back in the movies.
And of course, he does a bit of info dumping himself, which is like, why are you drinking unicorn blood? So
that was like his whole personality.
Yeah.
But this gets to the Sorcerer's Stone, and this is where I really like how Rowling uses it, because we think of the Sorcerer's Stone, we think of, lead into gold, and that's kind of the Philosopher's Stone. I need to be a little less American here. The thing about the Philosopher's Stone is, supposedly, lead and gold and so forth, but there's also this immortality element. And it's, I think, to the credit that it's not about the gold, it's about the immortality. Mm-hmm. And that this is a one-of-a-kind item. It is unique, great MacGuffin in that respect. And that this is something that Voldemort, if he is still around, and there's a lot of questions as to whether he is or not, would probably need if he's not in great shape. So Harry puts it all together that this dragon that Hagrid has was a ruse to figure out how to deal with Fluffy. They try to warn Dumbledore, but of course Dumbledore's conveniently absent. So they decide they have to find the stone before Snape does. And that's where you get, they find Fluffy's asleep. Fluffy.
This is Act 3.
This is Act 3. Yes, we're very much into Act 3 at this point. I figured we were into Act 3 when they figure out that about Flammel and the Sorcerer's Stone. Because
that seems like it was more towards the middle. Okay, there I wrote down the line that was the transition into Act 3. He says, "We go down the trap door tonight," and then.
Okay, so basically, from when they're going up there, they find Fluffy asleep. That's the Act 3.
Because that's the ticking clock tonight.
Okay,
so very much, yeah. If there's a ticking clock, then you can pretty much be sure that this is Act 3.
Mm-hmm. And then we see them going through these various challenges. You've got, they get past an awakened Fluffy. There's the Devil's Snare. There's the Flying Keys. There's the giant chess set. And Harry's friends, in effect, sacrifice themselves, literally in Ron's case, so that Harry can make it to the room where he encounters not Snape, but Quirrell.
Let me touch on the chess for a second. Like, this is, if you notice in movies, like sports movies, if they kind of break this rule, but a lot of the times, especially for chess, where it's long and complicated, they do abbreviated version of it, and this is
a montage.
This is basically just a montage of different moves. And so then, I mean, they probably planned out what the moves are, and they're probably actual moves, but we don't know what's going on. Mm-hmm. We just see all these chess pieces getting demolished. And
I remember seeing that montage, but the way they cut it, it looked like they were getting their asses handed to them. I was like, they're not going to win this. But then at the end, I'm going to sacrifice myself, and then we win. I was like, oh. I also didn't know how to play chess when I was 7, but...
But I also like how you don't know that. I mean, Ron does not know he's going to survive this. He thinks he is literally, that there's a real prospect he's sacrificing his life here.
Mm-hmm.
I think I thought he did die when I first saw it. I was like, oh, dang.
Mm-hmm. That's one of the things I like about, and I think Rupert Grint does a great job of this, about the whole Ron Weasley character, is that he constantly is underestimating himself. Mm-hmm. He's the younger brother. He's got these... is it 4 older brothers? There's the one with the dragons. There's the twins. There's the one that works at
George, Bill, Percy, Charlie. 5.
Yeah, he's got 5 older brothers, and he's lived a life of hand-me-downs, and everyone else is achieving. And you have the twins who are such an effective pair. Mm-hmm. and so he's constantly underestimating. I was thinking we had that scene earlier, we kind of glossed over this, about the mirror of Erised.
Oh yeah.
When he's looking at himself in there, and his great aspiration is to be head boy, to win the cup and all that. It's the sense, and it's not that he is outperforming his brothers, he is finally measuring up to them. And the reason I like it is because, and this is something that some people puzzle over, which is why it is that Hermione ends up with Ron instead of Harry. And yet we're seeing here the notion that Ron is brave and selfless, and how it's an appeal. And it's something that you see in the third movie, where it's when they're watching Buckbeak or from afar. They're watching what they think is the execution of Buckbeak, and when they think the executioner has chopped off Buckbeak's head, Hermione hugs Ron. But it's the idea that how it is very natural in the sense that even though Harry is the center, we do see how Ron does have those those great virtues.
He became the third wheel in his own movie.
Yeah, so
It's a dang shame.
but we now know that it's not Snape who's the antagonist. It's Quirrell, and that he's been behind all these things, and that Snape has actually been trying to save Potter, which I think was the part that Harry still had difficulty grasping. But we also hear this strange voice, and it turns out throughout the movie, Quirrell's been wearing this weird turban. It's a very unique headpiece, and they don't really explain how the wizards really are not exactly fashion templates. That they're very.
It's interesting early on and I didn't talk about this when it happened, but in the Leaky Cauldron, all the wizards look very Dickensian, straight out of A Christmas Carol or something. And then Quirrell is obviously there with the turban.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And it turns out he has this very unique headpiece, not because it's just like crazy fashion, it's because it hides Voldemort, who is somehow living on the back of his head. This very weakened, fragment of Voldemort. I believe it's an actual Horcrux.
I think that's just his soul.
Well, the Horcrux is a portion of his soul, and this goes to what happens later in the series.
I guess so. I guess technically it would be a Horcrux.
Yeah, he divides his soul 7 times, and the series basically is about all the Horcruxes gradually being destroyed. And what's interesting is that of the 7 Horcruxes, this is the only one that Harry Potter destroys.
This is the only one that has a nose.
Yeah, exactly. We were commenting on that too just before we started recording. And the other interesting thing is, it's in a way, it's not even Harry who destroys the Horcrux. Quirrell can't find the stone. It somehow involves Harry. He puts Harry before the mirror. Turns out Harry somehow magically has it in his pocket. When Quirrell finds this, he tries to grab Harry, and somehow doing so reduces him to ashes. And it turns out it's because Lily Potter has protection spell on him that is a product of her love and is something that Voldemort can't grasp, much less overcome.
A very traumatizing scene for a 7-year-old, by the way.
I will burn off your face with the power of love.
Yeah.
What is this magic?
What is this magic?
And
It's love!
Get it away from me.
And really, after that, you get this. I mean, to me, it's kind of this cheesy wrap up where Harry wakes up in the infirmary, and Dumbledore, tells him it's all good, and Ron's alive, and Hermione's fine, and everything's fine. Unfortunately, Slytherin has won the cup, but at the big dinner, Dumbledore, basically
Psych.
rigs it. I'm just going to start throwing points at these people. And so even though Slytherin was supposed to win, we're actually going to go ahead and make it Gryffindor. And somehow all the houses cheer about this. I think even a few people in Slytherin did. Maybe it's because the actors didn't get the extras didn't get the notes not to cheer. It's like,
Hey, no, this is a bad thing.
yeah.
I like to think he's giving everyone 50 points, but then he's adding up 60 points for you, actually. And 10 points to Neville. Okay, they win.
Exactly. He does the weird suspense thing where we get points to Ron for playing chess, and Hermione for being, doing her thing, and Harry for doing his thing. And we're 10 points away. And I'm just going to go ahead and...
My brother was like, at this point, he's like, okay, and then for Slytherin... negative 60 points.
It's the thing about which is it's just so arbitrary. You have to wonder why, because I believe Dumbledore is from House Gryffindor, and why Snape doesn't say, I see, I had to rig it for Potter and rig it for Gryffindor. So Although they do mention that Slytherin had like the 6-year winning streak, which maybe that's what all the other houses were celebrating. It's not that Gryffindor won; it's that Slytherin didn't win.
I'm tired of these people, man.
So,
do you win? What do you win for winning the House Cup? Do you get
Eternal
anything?
glory, whatever that is.
well, I think of the point that a lot of people make, and I think there's a lot of truth that how it's this weird universe where their experience in what amounts to high school is the highlight of their lives. And how
that is the way it is for a lot of people.
Yeah, exactly. Basically, the wizarding world are people who all peaked in high school and who then spend the rest of their lives obsessing over those things, and it just defines their existence.
It's pretty sad.
So, I mean, this is like equivalent to winning the Nobel or the Oscar. We could take that triumph with us.
And I was 11 years old when I won it. What have you done since then? I won the House Cup.
Yeah, Nicholas Flamel, he did invent a Power Stone, a Philosopher's Stone, but his real achievement was he won the House Cup 2 years in a row back in the 1400s.
He really didn't have anything to do it. He was just in the winning house.
He was just being immoral because he just wanted to relive that every year. just to savor that for the next 6 centuries. So. And that's Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone.
Now our review of Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban.
We open again with Harry back at Privet Drive. Only now he is 2 years older and he is surreptitiously practicing magic, which is something he shouldn't be doing, but clearly at this point, Harry has really embraced his wizarding side. And you get a sense as to why he shouldn't be practicing magic, because when Vernon's sister, Aunt Marge, shows up and she's insulting Harry's parents, and Harry's emotions get the better of him, and he unintentionally causes her to inflate and float away. And it's a nice comedic scene. Mm. And one of the things I love about it is that as Aunt Marge is floating away and you pull back inside, you see Dudley just kind of so nonchalant.
Just watching the TV
Turns
still.
the TV back
Exactly,
on.
watching TV. It's kind of, and I think that better than anything else talks about how, the Dursleys have accepted that magic is there, even if they are not themselves magical. And while Vernon's freaking out and
Petunia,
thank you. Yeah. Petunia's freaking out that it's that Durs is like, oh, just another day with Harry in the house.
I like that Aunt Petunia is played by the lady that plays the Trenchbull in Matilda. I was like, it's Aunt Trenchbull. That she walks in.
Marge.
Yeah, Marge. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of feel bad in a way she gets stereotyped in these kind of mean lady roles, but she does it so well. Again. Yeah. So
they just watch Matilda and they're like, "That's our person."
But Harry realizes that what has happened is definitely a problem, and so and Uncle Vernon has made it clear that he's hoping that this means that Harry somehow loses magic, so he runs away from home, and while he's sitting there, he's met by the night bus, which apparently rescues wizards and witches in times of need. And this is where we get this madcap ride to the Leaky Cauldron. And on the way, we find out from the bus conductor's newspaper that Sirius Black, played by the amazing Gary Oldman, who is a convicted murderer, has escaped from Azkaban prison.
And this is introducing the plot a lot sooner than they did in Sorcerer's Stone.
Well, I think here you're seeing the difference between having to build the wizarding world versus now you've had two
films. Now they just get to play in it.
Exactly. And you're assuming that people are familiar enough with it to where you don't have to go back and have these cheesy reminders as to how things work. Mm-hmm. So, I always enjoy it when a filmmaker trusts his audience. So, which they did here, and this is where he gets to meet the Minister of Magic himself, Cornelius Fudge, played by the legendary Robert Hardy, who says Harry, guess what? Yes, use magic. Yes, you shouldn't have, but we're gonna let you off. You've learned your lesson. So the next day, he gets to meet Ron and Hermione, and then the rest of the Weasley family, and they can begin their journey to Hogwarts. But now we're seeing what the wizarding world does when there is a crisis, which is they're looking for this very dangerous person. Exactly what he did is not explained in detail, but he's very dangerous, and they're sending out these Dementors. And I think really here is where you see just how different it is, because I have to say these Dementors are very nicely done as a special effect. They're inky, they're foreboding, and the effects around them they literally suck all the heat and life from their presence. It's very well done.
And I think a big reason why that might be is because originally they tried out tests with like underwater puppets to see if it would work, and it really didn't work, but it was good reference for the CG guys to get that look of the flowing robes behind them.
Interesting.
Yeah. But it's also a nice hallmark to the fact that the CG work on here is on a different level overall.
It is.
Oh yeah.
I'm not going to say it was perfect, because a couple scenes were. I was kind of like they kind of stood out more because they were more like the CG in the first movie, but here, I mean, it's such a nice effect. And for some reason, they assault Harry. The one Dementor that's searching the train assaults Harry. But then the Dementor is repelled by Remus Lupin, played by David Thewlis. And Thewlis is an interesting actor. He apparently tried out for the Quirrell role in the first movie. He didn't get Ian Hart beat him out, but Ian Hart apparently convinced him to try out for this role. And I kind of like that. Wait,
who was Ian Hart?
He played Quirrell in the first movie.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So basically, the guy who beat him out for the role says, "Don't try out for the Lupin role," which ended up being a bigger role and let's face it, a more remunerative one.
Yeah.
So, but Lupin's on his way to Hogwarts because he's going to be the new Defense Against the Dark Arts instructor. So we're getting a sense early on as to he's a person of ability. He can take on a Dementor and drive it off and save Harry. We get the first day of the new term. It's a very different sequence, and maybe it's because in part they don't have to do the sorting hat thing, but it's so much of a you get the choir, you get more of a sense of celebration. Mm-hmm. In the first one, it kind of felt like the first day of camp where all the counselors are sorting out the kids, and maybe that's what that's kind of necessary. But here, it's more the sense of. You get a real sense as to why these kids' experience at Hogwarts is so beloved. I mean, it's the kind of thing that kind of makes Sirius Black, looking wistfully at Hogwarts at the end of the movie and kind of, talking about how wonderful place is. For the first time, it's like, yeah, I can see that now.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that might have to do with this is where I noticed the most of a change from, like, cinematography-wise from the first one. Like, in the Great Hall, like, the camera is always moving. It's always either going in or out.
It's much more dynamic.
Yeah, much more dynamic.
In the third one.
Yeah. I really like that. I like almost the entire movie, the camera is moving. Mm-hmm. It feels like the story is more dynamic and also the camera movement is more dynamic. So
this actually gets to something that I'm hoping we can address more directly in the CRISS. This is something, again, when I was doing some research for this, I was fascinated by the relationship between the directors. That Chris Columbus does the first two. This is the only one that Alfonso Cuarón does. And then you have Mike Newell and a couple of the people, I think. But how the challenge that Columbus's successors faced of doing what they wanted to do with it, especially with all that was changing, the budgets were getting bigger and so forth, but while at the same time staying true to a lot of the elements that Columbus introduced. Mm-hmm. And it strikes me when you're talking about the cinematography about how is that because the technology was better to do that type of thing, or was it because Cuarón was just a more dynamic filmmaker? And
that's his style.
Yeah.
I think
it's probably a mixture of both. But Cuarón's definitely a more like stylized director.
And I think it was all for the better here. And I think Cuarón maybe benefited from the fact that there were other things that he could do that weren't available to Columbus. But it really is fascinating about how I wonder if at some level, even though they in public they tend to be very respectful for each other, there's like their own little community of, we all directed Harry Potter movies, but the degree to which there must have been kind of like, oh God, I gotta work within these constraints. All right, that's my movie, but
But I mean, he pretty much like started from scratch with Prisoner. Like he reset a lot of things, especially
like the geography.
The geography of Hogwarts.
Yeah.
Where that really stood out for me was the pendulum in the front, where you have like this. You go out to there's I can't remember. I don't know the geography of Hogwarts well enough, but where you have this courtyard. And there's this pendulum that swings, and of course it's a nice.
It's put there because of the time travel.
Exactly. It's a nice, it foreshadows the role that time travel plays in it very nicely, but it's also such a great visual effect the way it sweeps back and forth.
Very ominous.
You have nothing like that in the first movie.
No.
So, the most you get is, oh look, they did this enchantment where the ceiling looks like the sky.
I think the movie this is probably closest to of Cuarón's is Little Princess. I don't know if you've seen that, but it's visually it's very similar. It's very dark and lots of greens, and I can't remember like camera movement wise. I think this one's more dynamic than that was, but DNA wise, I feel like that's probably the closest to it. Anyway, can't talk about it much because you've seen it. But anyway.
So, but now we're in a new term, and I like how they really convey a sense of all the changes that are taking place, because now we have new teachers. We have Madam, I didn't get her notes, but the one played by Emma Thompson, who's the divination
Professor Trelawney.
Yeah, Trelawney.
Yeah, Trelawney, thank you. We have Hagrid. He's now the care of magical creatures teacher, and of course he's that teacher who's kind of like, oh, this will be fun, and it's going to be perfectly safe. And so this is where he decides for day one he's going to introduce the class to the hippogriff, which is apparently a kind of a dangerous creature. And while he does a great job of teaching it, Draco Malfoy is going to do what Draco Malfoy does. He's going to be a jerk, and so he provokes the hippogriff, and that sort of that becomes kind of a running subplot where is that Hagrid's first day as a teacher, now his judgment's being called into question, his exposure of his kids to this hippogriff, and that's something that. And then what I like about it is that it's subtle, but then they do that nice callback, and that's as much Rowling, I think, as it is Cuarón and so forth. But Harry quickly establishes a bond with Lupin. Lupin very quickly becomes a mentor. And it's more than just that Lupin is this great teacher. I mean, Rowling wrote Lupin as the model of the ideal teacher. That Lupin is everything that she thinks a great teacher is. Yeah. But it's also the fact that Lupin was a friend of Harry's dad. So we have this case of this personal connection, and Lupin is really reaching out and trying to mentor Harry in a way that none of his previous teachers done. Certainly not Snape.
Yeah, I think this is a good time to bring up that I think this movie is, and the book too, are intentionally like a depression and anxiety allegory. Like the Dementors represent that.
Yeah, Ron's been very explicit about that.
Yeah, and the way that Lupin talks to him is like a teacher talking. And I haven't really had exactly a person like this, but there is one that's close. Anyway, but he talks to him about this, and it's like he's trying to lead him through, like somebody who's had this before, and he's trying to guide him through it. But I had this experience once that was really cool, where I had a really bad panic attack cycle, and it was as we were filming it was like at this church in Phoenix, and it was just horrible. Like I was thinking these crazy things, and I knew exactly what was happening because I'd had it before. And I went to the person I respected most in the class, which was Terry Donnelly, which do you know who that is? Yeah. And I went to talk to him, and I'm like, can we go to the front of the church to talk? He's like, no, I said, can we go somewhere to talk? And he's like, how far do we got to go? And you could tell he was a little bit annoyed, but we went up there and we went and talked at the front of the church, and I just spilled on him all this stuff of, I don't know what it is. I don't know what it's called yet, because I hadn't even figured out the name anxiety. And he's like, F it, it's just a class. Go home and take care of your mental health.
Dang.
That cut it off, and it quit, like, at that point. And that was as far as it went that time. Like, there's been other cycles that lasted for months and months and months, but he just had that has dealt with everything, because he was an AD and a producer, and like, he just had that personality of not dealing with crap, that he's like, this is this is just a stupid class, go home. Mm-hmm. So I still repeat that sometimes when I start having problems of F it, it's just a class. Mm-hmm. Stop worrying about the current situation and just go home, go take care of yourself or whatever. But,
he has a sense of proportion.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about that till you described that. But going, cycling back to the movie is how it really is. I think one of the reasons why Rowling the series is as effective as it is, because she knows how to effectively make things metaphors for things that people can really relate to. And it's something I never really thought about, mostly because when I read a book, I tend to be driven by plot and character. I'm not kind of necessarily thinking about the big themes at first blush.
And the line that I like most from him in that one, from Lupin, is, there are true terrors in your past, things that your fellow students could never dream of, or I don't know. And it's like, he's got true trauma of his parents being murdered, but like, I don't know. And
of course, he's constantly having these he's already suffered a Dementor attack.
Yeah,
which is something that they make clear is, very traumatizing, that, adults fear, and here he is, a 13-year-old boy, and he's already been assaulted by them once. And they explore this in further books too. If he's got like this connection to death, like with the Thestrals, the deathly horses that only people that have seen somebody die can see. And it's kind of the same thing with the Dementors, of they're drawn to him because he's got all this past trauma or whatever. Yeah. It is kind of funny how they're kind of like magical flies buzzing around him throughout the movie. Yeah. So after Harry has this, conversation with Lupin, he returns to Gryffindor Tower, and then he and the other students discovered that the portrait that's guarding their dorms was attacked. Big slashing marks through it. Yeah. And the fat lady who resided in it declared that Sirius Black is in the castle. And, even though the castle's being guarded by Dementors, even though they're like buzzing around outside, clearly they're not very good at stopping the determined users. And so the castle goes into lockdown. You have this night where they're all sleeping in the hallway, and they search the place where they can't find Sirius Black. So, but you saw these Dementors buzzing around, and that's where you have the Quidditch match. And oh my gosh, the Quidditch match is so much better done. Oh yeah, yeah. And it's more of a complicated shot too, because you're dealing with the weather. Yeah. So it's visually, just that rain and the gloomy atmosphere. I kind of love the gloomy atmosphere of this movie, and it's a thing where, and it feels this way in other movies where they're trying to ape this style a little bit, where they just slap on a color grade and make it look like that. Oh yeah. But this one, you can tell they did it with the lighting, with the weather, and I'm not sure how you plan for weather. Yeah. There's gloom and gray, but like there's still color and like and dynamic. There's that great shot to it of the Dementors coming over those flowers that are like they're like bright pink and saturated, and then they go gloomy and frozen. Yeah. They suck natural life with the color. Yeah, they suck the life out of them. Yeah. So, and it's a nice. It gets me again how so much better the film is, and we're not talking about 10, 15 years craft wise. And we're talking about a span of 4 years. And it's not like the technology, I think, grew by, advanced that great, quickly.
Yeah, I think it just comes down to style.
Yeah.
Like Cuarón is just a very visually stylistic director, whereas I think the strengths of Columbus are working with kids. And getting like that Christmassy Home Alone vibe, which he also directed Home Alone.
Very family movie-esque director.
You really get that in, I think, that middle sequence when Harry is there with Ron and Fred and George when they're at Hogwarts over the holidays. You get the warmth, you get the sense that even though they're parentless, their families are elsewhere, that it's this nice comfortable experience.
Yeah.
So
I think of Harry Potter movies as Christmas movies.
Oh yeah, especially the first two.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's one of the things I'm struck by how in the first 6 novels there's that beat. You know where she established the first one, but there's always there's Hogwarts matches. Harry's always there for the holidays. They got the end of her term exams, which is right around the time, of course, that the big threat is confronted. And then you wrap it up with him going on summer, and yet we never get Harry Potter in a summer vacation.
Yeah.
So
the thing I like about the gloomy tone of the emotional tone of the third one is it creates contrast for when you have those the Buckbeak's flying sequence. It's just it feels more what is the word just
liberating.
Wondrous. Liberating's a good word.
Euphoric.
Yeah, euphoric. Yeah, you just feel those ups because you've got this kind of gloomy, oppressing thing of story, and it's not like he's just splashing on a coat of paint to the canvas that's this gray color. It's coming from the story of there's a murderer after him. So,
and
the Dementors.
And the Dementors are such a great element because they're such an external element. By this point, people have seen Hogwarts over 2 years, from the first 2 films, and they're so alien. And that's why I think that the Quidditch match being a storm is a nice thing because it's like one, there's not this juxtaposition of the Dementors on a sunny day, which probably would have diminished their threat. But it's also the idea that somehow the Dementors are
changing the weather.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. They've made this. And
that's very much a Cuarón thing of he's the mood of it changes the weather of there's a lot of establishing shots in this that are just following that bird and a leaf and different nature things, and it's just giving you that feel that he's going for, where they don't really do much story wise, but there's this feeling of space and tone that it lets you breathe a little bit and then gives you the sense for, and really the only thing that those are doing is setting up the Whomping Willow. But
it's also interesting how, whereas in the first movie, the Quidditch match was something that played out, we get the middle of the Quidditch match, we get, Harry being attacked by the Dementors, falling off his broomstick, being saved, but and then that's it for the Quidditch match. And I keep thinking about the next scene where Harry wakes up in the infirmary and his question is who won the match. They never answer that question.
Yeah, that's true. Story wise, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, Quidditch in this one, Quidditch is more about establishing kind of the darker mood, how the Dementors are affecting the school negatively. It's more an example about how this thing that apparently all the wizards love is being in a way corrupted or distorted by this external presence, this external depression that's afflicting the school. Harry needs a break, and he wants to go to Hogsmeade, the village right next to Hogwarts, but he has a problem, which is, and this goes back to something. It's not really established at the when it's introduced, but Harry needed the permission of his guardian to go into Hogsmeade. So at the beginning of the film,
which is a great storytelling thing because it's it just jabs the knife in of you have no parents and that's why you're having these problems to begin with.
He goes to Uncle Vernon, but of course this actually gives Uncle Vernon leverage, so he won't sign the paper. and so he's already had to see his friends go off and enjoy the wonders of Hogsmeade for without him, and so he's so desperate to get out. So he puts on his cloak of invisibility, which he got in the first movie, and so he's trying to sneak out, and he gets intercepted by Fred and George. And these two, they're very much partners in crime, and they're always into mischief. And it's funny how they stop Harry. Harry is, I think, a little surprised by this, but it turns out they're like, because Harry's trying to sneak out, and the one time you really can't wear an invisibility cloak is when there's snow, which there is at this point. So saying we've actually got a better way to do this. We've got this thing called the Marauder's Map, and again, it's a nice insertion of something that becomes vital to how the plot plays out later on. But this, in the short term, allows Harry to sneak into Hogsmeade. First, you get that nice scene where Hermione and Ron are looking at the what's the name of that haunted house? The Shrieking Shack. And then Draco and Crabbe and Goyle, are getting ready to assault them, and then the snowballs come out of nowhere, and Draco and his cronies get chased off. But he sneaks into Hogsmeade when he sees Fudge there with McGonagall and Madame Puddifoot, and they have this conversation in which Harry finally learns what Sirius Black did, which was that he basically turned in his parents to Voldemort. He betrayed his parents to Voldemort. So he was the reason why Voldemort killed his parents. He also killed, this friend of theirs named Peter Pettigrew as well. And now Sirius Black goes from being this figure of mystery to this figure of hate. And Harry doesn't just want to remember the adventures; he wants to kill them. And I think this is where you really see how much better of an actor Daniel Radcliffe is. He sells that. The pain. Yeah. This loss that just kind of hangs on him, even though now he's in this magic world, and he's constantly with these reminders of how, they've lost his parents. And
it's like his first chance to really, show emotion. Yeah. The first two, were literally him just, asking questions, what is that?
Yeah.
What's that?
And just
what's going on there?
That same wonder look on his face for everything. Oh, new wizarding thing.
I mean, the only thing you might see from him is determination. I'm going to stop you type of thing. But here, it's like he's finally feeling. He finally has a tangible figure on which to unleash his grief.
Yeah, you get chills when he screams. Yeah. For the first time like that.
Yeah. So he has Lupin teach him the Patronus charm, and he's basically preparing for this confrontation with Black. But then one night, while he's studying the Marauder's Map, he sees Peter Pettigrew identified on it. And it's a nice scene where he goes out there, you see Pettigrew, coming on the map. You hear this scrabbling sound, but you don't see anything. And then, of course, you have that nice comic relief where Snape confronts him, and Potter's changed the bat back just in time, and then Lupin shows up and bails him out with a nice little snide aside to Snape, underscoring how they don't like each other. And it's not just because Lupin took the position as defensive against the dark arts instructor that Snape wants. No, there's something more personal going on there. But then Harry just casually mentions that the map must be broken because it says Peter Pettigrew was out there. And Lupin's like, that's impossible, but it triggers, the events that lead to the climax. So the next morning...
Okay, before we leave this scene, though, there's just a technical thing that I want to see if you know how they did. So the wands where they have the Lumos thing, they're kind of... They're not lighting up the whole set. It's localized to them. So I know they had the light on the end of the wand but I'm sure that can't be how they lit them. Is it from above or?
I mean, from the behind the scenes stuff that I've seen, I think that was the primary light source, and then it just kind of fell off. The light just fell off.
Yeah, when he puts it on the map, it does fall off behind the map. So that's, I don't know how you get a light bright enough.
Is it something that you can, in post, you can somehow enhance it? In the same way that we can, say, digitally enhance a photo.
It's really just manipulating what's already there is what you can do.
I mean, you could make things darker in post. You can't really, like, add light.
Okay. Yeah, like the source of where it comes from, you can't.
Yeah.
Like if they're cheating it and, I don't know, like if you do it from above, which I was looking at it, I'm like, that seems like the most logical way they do it, but it doesn't look like the light's coming from above.
Yeah.
It looked like it was actually coming from the wand.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was how they did it.
Well, could it have been that
That's
though
cool.
that they did it from above, but then in post they changed it because you said they could darken it. Did they just simply darken those elements so all you saw
Well,
was
there's a
could be.
perfect example from Sorcerer Stone that tells you why that would be very difficult. The brim on the hat for that part.
Oh, yeah.
They
The
took
sorting
it
hat.
off for some reason. I don't know. They didn't have a brim on there, so they had light on their faces, so they have fake shadows on their eyes for that part, and it looks kind of janky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's something you don't, until you, like, point it out, you don't notice. But then
Yeah.
once you realize, like, oh,
Yeah.
yeah, I see there.
and then the challenge is seeing past that. So
That does make me think, like, how bright could that wand have been?
Yeah,
And, like, how'd they power it? Did they just, like, run a cord, like, through the
they'd
core
have
of the
to have
wand?
a cord from it.
yeah. So the next morning, the trio decides they're going to see Hagrid prior to Buckbeak's execution. There's been a hearing. It's been pushed by Draco's father, who is a governor of the school, and Hagrid's defense falls on deaf ears, so they decide they're going to kill the hippogriff. I like there's a nice personal moment where Harry and Ron and Hermione are walking to Hagrid's, and they see Draco and the cronies, and they're looking forward to watching the hippogriff get executed. And Hermione is just so furious, and she's about to zap him, and she's like, "Hermione, it's not worth it." And so she puts the wand away, and just punches him in the face. It's such a nice character moment.
Yeah.
You get a sense of Hermione's passion and how and her willingness to stand up for what's right.
And this might be Act 3. I'm not sure.
I think this is
yeah.
Act 3. It is like what you. I mean, it's a question of, is it when he finds out that Black has killed, was responsible for the death of his parents, or is it when they begin this journey? And I'm thinking you're probably right, but because tonally it's more, it's like a lot of actions taking place, whereas right before then with Lupin teaching him.
Oh, wait. Okay.
Would it be the time turner scene, like when they go back in time?
I think the beginning of going back in time is actually the beginning of Act 3.
It's kind of an interesting structure, because it feels like Act 3 is a little earlier, like when they watch Buckbeak die for the first time.
Yeah,
that's what I think is good.
The reason why is because I'm thinking that is because Buckbeak's death would be like a perfect end of Act 2 low point.
Oh, I see.
And so then going into Act 3, it's like, oh, we get to...
But then you have that whole sequence between Buckbeak's supposed execution and the production of the time turner, because that's when you get, Black and Pettigrew and at the
I could see that
shack.
as
Yeah.
Act 3, like when they get to the Whomping Willow part.
So
Yeah, the sequence of that is messed up in my head because I actually fell asleep for the Act 3 stuff.
Oh,
So I had to go back and watch it, and now it's kind of twisted in my head. Like when I was watching it, I'm like, oh, but the time travel stuff hasn't happened yet. It's like, duh, the time travel stuff hasn't happened yet. They don't have anything to travel back to. Anyway.
but they go and see Hagrid, and they're commiserating over Buckbeak's fate. Hagrid also says, "Oh, by the way, I found Scabbers, who's been missing for much of the movie," and Scabbers gets handed off to Ron. Then there's this moment where they're chatting, but all of a sudden something shatters a vase and then hits Harry in the back of the head, and they look outside and they see Fudge and Dumbledore and the Executioner coming, so they got to get out of there. So they, go to the pumpkin patch, and they manage to get away. And they see off from a distance, they see the Executioner going out to the pumpkin patch, and you hear a whoop, and you assume, the Hippogriff is dead. And then Scabbers bites Ron's hand and runs off. So Ron's chasing Scabbers.
Okay, this is probably the start of Act 3.
Right here.
Right here from Scabbers on, because this is the main plot stuff. That was Buckbeak, which is really a subplot. But
that's a good point. So Ron catches Scabbers, but at the near the Whomping Willow, but then off in the distance we see this large dog who grabs Ron by the leg and drags him into a hole at the base of the Whomping Willow. Harry and Hermione have to, just navigate the Whomping Willow, which is, I guess, whomping is what just swing it around. It's like a carnival ride out of control. But they manage to get into the passage, and the tunnel leads to the Shrieking Shack. And there they see Ron. They go up to the top, and there's Ron in a room, and they find out that the dog is, in fact, Sirius Black, who is an animage. He can morph between being a dog and being a human. And he looks nuts. He is, he's thin. He's got ragged clothes on, and he's screaming.
His eyes are
His teeth are rotten.
And he's not really making full sense. He says that I didn't turn your I didn't turn your parents in. The person who did is right here, and it looks like he's planning to kill Ron. But Harry kind of pins him down, and he's getting ready to apparently kill Black, and then Lupin bursts in, and he knocks the wand out of Harry's hand. And initially it's kind of like, oh, I see you've degenerate, but then turns out Lupin and Black are friends, and the trio they feel so betrayed. Lupin's been their favorite professor this season. This year. So. Tries best to say semester. I'm like, no, it's not semester. I mean year. And they feel betrayed. And then you have this weird moment where it seems like Snape is the hero because he comes in, and he of course he makes the mistake of monologuing. I'm so looking forward to this.
Sly dog.
And again, you get a hint of the backstory that you're going to get later in the series. But Harry makes this really curious leap of faith where he disarms Snape, Expelliarmus, and Snape goes flying across the room, and now he's out of the scene. And then we finally get the explanation that Lupin and Black reveal that Scabbers is Pettigrew. That Pettigrew didn't die. He's been the rat. And Ron just cannot wrap his brain around this because Scabbers has been there. I love that. And Gary Oldman, he does. Sometimes I wonder if he's just overacting a little bit too much, but at the same time, given the fact that he's been in this horrible prison for over a decade, he's not very socialized at this point. So he's kind of doing the bit. Well, for 12 years, right?
Curious long for a rat.
Exactly. So and then they do something to morph Scabbers back into Pettigrew, played by, again, another great actor, Timothy Spall, and who's also an animagus. So they're going to take Pettigrew back to the castle, and they go outside. It's night now, and wouldn't you know, it's the full moon, and Lupin's not prepared for it, so he morphs into a werewolf, which, all of a sudden their plans go out the window. They have to, Black has to fight Lupin because he's now in control. Pettigrew takes advantage of the opportunity to escape. And Black, Black manages to. Lupin the werewolf gets distracted. Black is kind of by a lakeside. He's injured, and then of course the Dementors show up. Harry tries to protect him. He can't. The Dementors are on the verge of getting both of them, but then all of a sudden this unseen figure unleashes this powerful Patronus charm and chases off all these Dementors. So Potter survives. Wakes up in the infirmary. There's Ron. His leg is bandaged because of where the dog bit him. Hermione's there, and it's just miserable. Black is in custody. He is going to. Is it the Dementor's kiss that he's going to get?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then Harry says that he saw his dad
Yes.
do the charm.
His dad saved him. He's convinced his dad saved him. So he is, ready for that. But you have, also the hippogriff is dead, and they got to fix this. And Dumbledore shows up, and I love the way that he does this. It's kind of like he's talking just to Hermione, and Harry has no idea what's going on. Ron really has no idea what's going on. But this is where you get the explanation of this thing that they've been throwing in throughout the movie, where Hermione seems to show up out of nowhere in these classes. Mm-hmm. It's like this class, and all of a sudden Hermione's there asking a question, how did you get here? And it turns out she has this device called the Time Turner, and whereas some people might use that to knock off an enemy or to place a bet at the track and win $1 million, she uses it in a typical nerd fashion to take more classes.
Absolutely crazy.
Especially considering that she has such contempt for the divination class and for Professor Trelawney.
My question is, does she use it to get more sleep?
That's an excellent question. We also think about it also means that she's aging.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah. So she's
at least a year older than
yes,
yeah.
Or at least several months older because of this. But being the Type A person that she is, it's a small price to pay to be able to take extra classes.
Gosh.
Apparently, I mean, maybe it's understandable if there's no summer school option. You want to graduate early. You got to find some sort of magical workaround. And she's had this Time Turner, which was given to her by McGonagall, and so. You get this. So she takes the chain off, wraps it around her and Harry, and then turns back time 3 turns as Dumbledore suggested, and then all of a sudden we're back at the latter part of Act 2. Mm-hmm. And we've had other crisscrosses where we've talked about time travel, and I must confess, I was watching this with a very skeptical eye, but it really works nicely. It's very well done. And again, I think credit goes to Rowling. She plotted this out and everything, but it's very well executed.
Yeah,
and because you also have to do it in a way that where visually it works, and I thought it worked very well. Mm-hmm. We get to see her watching her. We get to see them watching Hermione punch Draco. I especially love the line where. When Hermione is hiding in the woods, and there's her past self hiding behind the pumpkin. She's like, does the back of my hair really look like that? It's such a nice personal touch. But they, without changing anything, that's the thing. Because it had been a while since I had read the story. I was like, do they actually change events? But no, they're actually just there ensuring things turn out the way that they happened.
Yeah, they do.
It's very vague.
It's almost like Lost time travel, where if things are changed, like if things have already happened, because you've already been back in the past. So they demonstrate that with the rocks hitting him in the back of the head the first time. Uh-huh. Like it's already happened. You're not Back to the Futuring it where you're changing things.
It makes my head hurt.
It's already happened.
But they let the hippogriff escape. And you think that's a change, but then it turns out that the
cuts a pumpkin.
That was just
it was just a pumpkin. Yeah, mm-hmm. He's got his axe. Got to whack something. and so we get them saving the hippogriff, and then when Lupin turns into the werewolf, they. Turns out Hermione's the one who did the wolf call that distracted the werewolf. But then, of course, they got to deal with the werewolf now. It's chasing them, but they're able to do that. And then they see Harry and Sirius dealing with the Dementors. And this is it is so fascinating how Harry is so looking forward to this because he gets to finally meet his dad. Mm-hmm. He figures his dad is the one who saved him, and so he's waiting, and as Hermione realizes, it's not Harry's dad who saved Harry; it was Harry who did it. And so Harry, finds within that the power to make such a Patronus that not only can deal with one Dementor, which is all that Lupin says he can deal with. It just deals with the entire flock of them. It's so it's earned, I feel.
Yeah. I really like this moment because I hadn't thought of this until this watch through, but it ties in with something else that I've heard from, I wish I could remember the guy's name, but it's a filmmaker that does indie films that, anyway, he said the cavalry isn't coming. Like like that. I love that thing. And like, he's got to save himself. Like,
And it's
it's very true to life. Like, there were many, many moments where you find the cavalry isn't coming. You just got to figure this thing out by yourself.
And it's fascinating how the story takes it to a different level, because it's not just that he thinks the cavalry is coming. He thinks the cavalry did come.
Yeah.
It's almost like he's just hanging around to thank them for doing it.
Where you at, Dad?
Yeah, exactly. That's when he realizes that it's not what they thought. That it was, in fact, that it was Harry who saved himself.
Yeah.
And then they, having done that, they then go bust Sirius. This is kind of like, okay, so they've got this dangerous person, and yet they only create so much defense that a third-year Hogwarts student can get past. Yeah. She blasts out the lock. They put Sirius on the hippogriff, and there's this nice, touching scene where Harry finally has, family who loves him. It's such a fascinating evolution. And again, Radcliffe has that range now where he can sell it. He can sell that not just the rage at Black and his love for Black, but also how that evolution took place. It never seems unnatural what he's done. And then you get the jinky moment where Black is on the hippogriff and he rides off. That's like I guess they had that leftover scene from the first movie. The CGI's that bad. Yeah. But you get
I love that scene though between them though, because it creates this image of what they think. Well, no, I guess that's earlier when they're talking in the woods and he's looking up at Hogwarts. Like, it creates this image of what his future might be, and then it just pulls the rug right out from under him.
Yeah.
Makes this really bittersweet ending. Like, they saved him, but he can't be around. So
yeah, because he's not been exonerated.
Yeah.
As Dumbledore puts it, they're not going to trust the word of 3 Hogwarts students.
Yeah.
So
it finally felt like there was like a sense of hopefulness.
Yeah.
Like in the series, like the first two, like bad things are happening to him all the time. He just has to survive. But now there's like a chance he could actually like have a happy life.
Yeah.
And I think that like
you get that
really
from Harry
too.
Harry envisioning what his life would be like. I could stay with you in the summer. We'll get a place in the country. It's so idyllic. It gets to how Harry does not choose these things to happen to him. They happen to him, and he has to deal with it. Which, such a great metaphor for life.
Yeah.
But then the next day, Harry and Hermione come down to the dining hall, and there's a package for him. It's brand new broomstick. It's a firebolt, the best broomstick there is, a gift from his godfather. And Harry goes riding off on to test it out, and you get that great final freeze frame.
Yeah.
He's got this big old smile on his face.
Yeah.
And
It was a bold move.
He was.
Yeah. Then
The right move? I don't know.
Yeah. Then the Marauders map credits.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like it's the right move because it feels earned. That Harry is it's not just that he's overcome yet another trial and survived. It's the fact that he's building something.
Yeah.
He's got his friends, but now he also has this family, and it feels and he also understands better, what his parents did. So.
And that is our review of Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. Okay, so now we go crisscross. Every once in a while, 2 films will share a bond to transcend time, space, and even genre. These similarities go down to their DNA. So let's dissect and deconstruct, compare and contrast. It's time to go crisscross.
Crisscross.
Okay, so I'll start with similarities because they're pretty obvious. Both Harry Potter movies, they both have pretty similar beats. so they, so I guess maybe real quick, we might want to just go into what makes a Harry Potter story. I think the first most obvious is like it's a mystery plot.
And this is where I think of the contrast between the two, which is that Cuarón does such a better job with the suspense side of that than Columbus does. And this gets to how I kind of felt the first one was kind of just going through the motions. I didn't know again, I go into these movies, I've read the books, but it was fascinating to me how I realized as I was watching Prisoner of Azkaban about how I felt the suspense. I felt the tension. It was exciting, even though I knew exactly how it was going to turn out. And I never felt that with Sorcerer's Stone. And that to me is kind of the difference in how the mysteries are presented. The first one doesn't, and maybe it's part because the mystery has to concede some space to the world building. Yeah,
I think that's the biggest thing. Like just the structure of it is like class. You have to hit this beat, the Sorting Hat, and all the different things that you need for a Harry Potter movie. It's setting the template.
Yeah,
and it kind of has to do that, and it makes the structure kind of, I don't know. It's not as streamlined as the third one is allowed to be.
The first one really had to like explain things to you, and that kind of takes out some of the mystery. Like it's kind of like telegraphing like what's about to happen, as opposed to like the third one is like more visually storytelling.
Yeah, and it's something. It's interesting to think about how well that's done between the two movies, and to compare that to other franchises in terms of how sometimes they feel like they have to go back and re-explain things or reintroduce things, and not just simply accept the world that they built and move on from there. And again, I think there's a certain amount of trust of their audience. Although here, I think it's a trust that is because they think the audience is genius, but they just know that there's a lot of passion. People who are coming to see this are Harry Potter fans. They're going to know this stuff. They don't need to be reintroduced to it.
So want to jump into the reason, or half the reason at least, why we have Stefan here. Just the visual vocabulary of the two movies, like comparing them.
Yeah. Well, I think the first one was like at a time where it still felt like a movie from the 90s. Like they were using kind of like outdated technology, it felt like. And it was very like, you could tell like this is a set, this is a set, this is a set.
Oh, you could see the transitions.
Yeah. Even though they shot a lot of it like at actual castles. So it's not like the production design wasn't in it. But like the third one, I don't know, it just felt like a real lived-in place.
Yeah.
Like they really like bridged the gap between like reality and fantasy. Whereas in like the first one, it was just like, this is a completely made up world. And the fact that like we're all like Americans and it was like British, very British movie, that also kind of like made it seem like out of this world. Like, what the heck are they talking about? I can't understand you.
My brother was referencing that of like, what was he saying? But just like normal British things that they have seem like wondrous and amazing to us.
She came up with this crazy language for her book.
They drink tea.
Rubbish. Like, what are they calling that trash? Rubbish.
Rubbish. They have a burrow, like that's what the Weasleys live in.
Like, what the heck's a burrow?
Like, what's a burrow? It's so wondrous. It's like moles live in it. That's apparently just the name for a multi-leveled house in England.
Or they have, oh my gosh, they travel around in trains. It's so exotic.
Like, oh, wow. It's like they're back in time.
What is this strange, twisty creature that goes across the ground?
There was a lot of like dialogue in all those movies where like, I really don't understand what they're saying. I get the point, but
I'm starting to wonder if that's why Fantastic Beasts fails, because Rowling she's thoroughly British. And yet, does she really get American?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
She kind of just boring downs the terms, like they're going to call them nomads.
Oh,
Yeah.
that phrase. Such an awful phrase. I mean, muggle is kind of it's such a great word because it's both charming and dismissive at the same
Yeah.
time. And nomad, it's just kind of like so negative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this has nothing to do with anything, but the strongest thing about the Fantastic Beasts one was that muggle character. But
Yeah.
they really have no idea what to do with them in the sequels or anything. But anyway, okay.
It's kind of deviated from
Yeah.
the.
So I feel like the first movie is pretty standard. I don't know.
Very,
Would you say
it's like
coverage or
wide shot,
Yeah.
medium, close up.
and not a lot of movement,
All static, yeah.
all static. But it's hard to talk about that one. But the third one it very much goes to a different place with the camera. Even in the boring Great Hall scenes, it's constantly moving.
A lot of dolly
And-
shots, a lot of jib shots.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably just like the limitations of not really the time, but kind of the director. Like,
Yeah,
if you look at like
sure.
any of the movies Chris Columbus did, they're all very traditional.
yeah.
Yeah. But like Alfonso Cuarón's he's like an art house director, so he's
Yeah.
gonna push the limits.
There-
He did a Children of Men too, right?
Oh yeah,
Right after it was when he did after this one.
and that's a great transition to. I wanted to talk about the long takes because he's there's not as many as Children of Men and not as long, but I was thinking the Leaky Cauldron where he's talking to Mr. Weasley.
Oh,
and they
yeah.
go under a pillar and then to the next pillar and then the next one and then eventually right in front of you.
Yeah,
Where they're
you-
basically doing all the coverage in this one shot. That's kind of a Spielberg-y type thing.
Yeah, I think so. And you would never see that in the first one.
I have a question that
Yeah.
the two of you can. I'm hoping the two of you can shed some light on. Is the tracking shots you see in Prisoner of Azkaban? Are those ones that required more physical effects and physical presence, or are they still able to make the CGI work? Because it seems like it would be more difficult to do. As difficult as it is to do CGI, it'd be more difficult to do so during a moving shot. So would that cause them to rely more upon the practical effects?
This is a great segue to something I wanted to talk about. First of all, you're talking about where it's flying around Hogwarts type stuff. Yeah. So that's a lot of that is models or CGI, some kind of effect. But they marry it together with something called motion control, where you can repeat the same shot over again, exactly the same. And that's why the ghosts in this one looks so much better, I think. Because they have the horse ghosts
Yes.
in this one, where they gallop through, and they do a take with that horse in there and just have it gallop through and do its thing, and then they do the actual shot. And then they can comp the two together because the shot is computer controlled to look exactly the same.
Yeah, I'm not super well versed in how they do motion effects. I know a lot of it's they put a Fisher dolly, which is a big metal dolly with a up and down jib arm thing, and they put it on track. And they have an actual guy pushing it, so it's not. It'll be close to the same every take, but there'll be a little bit of difference.
Well, for motion control, I think all of it is even the track
It's all automated.
is automated. They record the motion. I think they probably have somebody do the motion with the camera first to record it, but then they play it back and do the exact same motion every time. That was made for Star Wars, by the way, all the ship shots,
yeah.
so they could repeat it over and over again, and you can get the lights on the ship in one pass and then different stuff. But,
I'm trying to remember in the third one when Lupin and Harry were walking down the bridge. Was that a one shot too, or a long take? It started wide and they started to get closer.
I remember that being a wide shot coming in on them. So I don't know if they'd, like nowadays they'd do that with a drone, I think. But I don't know how would they, how they'd get that might be an effect of what I'm thinking is they filmed them like in the mid shot of their, what it ends up on that shot, and then they comped it into the model of the bridge. But, because I don't think that bridge is actually there. So.
Oh, makes sense.
Or at least not in the form that.
Anyway,
it doesn't seem up to code.
I'm the VFX guy, so all this stuff kind of falls under that. But did that answer your question? I don't even remember what it was.
What are we talking about?
It was about the whether the challenge of having more motion shots meant that Caron would have had to have done more practical effects. Because I'm getting at the fact
For
that
some of it, yeah, I think.
I feel like there wasn't a lot of practical effects in this, so I feel like it was definitely more CG heavy than.
Well, we were talking, for example, about the wands and how that's was a practical
true,
effect.
Yeah, and also the chairs in the leaky cauldron that are folding them or setting themselves up on top of the table. But with that horse shot, though, it would have been almost impossible if a human were trying to replicate that move. So they can almost
Horse or hippogriff?
the horse ghosts.
Oh, the ghost horse. Okay, yeah. Further, like horse.
Horse.
Yeah.
Remember hippogriff,
Yeah.
which was very horse-like in how it operated.
So we kind of talked about the technical side of it, but like kind of like the collaboration between director and cinematographer or DP is about the feel of it, right? Like what you're going for. So like, what do you think the effect of these differences has on the third one as compared to the first?
I think it definitely like sets it up for the new like millennium of filmmaking. It definitely like sets the bar for like the rest of the films.
Yeah, that's true.
Because they never go back.
Yeah.
It's always like trying to progress and kind of like aging with like the audience, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah, and they never go back to Quran, but they always try to keep that style that you brought to it.
And I think that gets to how that it's not as though, like in, say, a Marvel franchise where they have different directors that bring very different styles, they are constantly trying to, evolve a style, but they're always trying to maintain a very, linear through line of it. So where, each director is going to add something, and then the other director has to. And I imagine this is quite an interesting challenge of both, respecting what's been done yet making it their own.
Yeah, that definitely would be a challenge. It's I don't know. That's why I kind of going through this, watching through this time. I don't want to give the third one too much credit because it is standing on the back of a giant, or maybe even two giants of on Christopher Columbus's back, but like he did all the hard work, and now Quran can just play in this world. But he does amazingly with that. But I noticed a couple handheld shots, like at the very beginning, which is not customary for Harry Potter at all.
Which shots were those?
Like as he's like, Harry, or she's like, Harry, open the door, and then it cuts from black to him opening the door, and she walks in.
Oh yeah.
So
yeah, that's nice. I mean, that kind of sets the tone of it's more of like a chaotic scene.
Yeah,
it's like raining and the dogs are barking.
Yeah, and what's interesting is they don't have any more shots after that, so it does just feel like a tone setter.
Could also be like, we're out of time. We got to film this now.
We gotta film. Yeah,
we're running late.
Although
I don't want to pay overtime.
They do use a lot of push-ins and pull-outs. So.
Yeah, that is kind of interesting. Because when I think of Prisoner of Azkaban, I don't think like handheld shots. I always think it's like very meticulously like well-crafted, like jib shots. Yeah, everything's smooth. So that's kind of interesting.
It It really does make me regret that Cuarón did not stick around to do the other films.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see how he would do Goblet of Fire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I do think, like, after the third one, like, it peaked at the third one. It, like, even when it got to the last one where they were pulling out all the stops, like, it feel like it never really...
Storytelling wise, I felt
for-
that it was better and bigger, but craft wise, you can't beat Cuarón.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like the third one's, like, it's a standalone movie, I think. Like, I think you could just show people Prisoner of Azkaban, and they'll be like... There might be some questions to, like, some backstory, but I feel like... They didn't even talk about Voldemort, really, in this one.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Yeah, Voldemort is more about what Voldemort did, not the fact that Voldemort is...
Yeah,
I
he's
think
not even
there's
the
just
bad guy.
one mention of him, like, on the night bus when he's like, you know about him, don't you? It's like, yeah, I know about him.
He's a murderer. Oh, wait, no, that was serious.
The actor was really good.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now we're going to do our star ratings for both movies. So, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Mark, what would you give it?
You know, this is a little harsh, but I'm going to give it 2 stars.
Okay.
It's just the roteness, the sense that, you know, we're just kind of going by the numbers with it. There was never any sense of we're going to take this and make it fresh and exciting. And it's something that really stands out when I compare it to Azkaban, which I felt that Cuarón did that. And, you know, in a way that really impressed me. So, yeah, I got to say 2 stars.
Okay.
It's kind of hard for me because I'm, like, such a big fan of it, and it was such a main part of my childhood growing up. Like, I would probably rate them all 5 stars. Like, but as, like, a filmmaker, I guess, and, like, a critique as an adult now, maybe 3.5 stars. 5 stars. Maybe 3.5 stars, I think.
Cool. Okay, well, I'm going to split the difference and say 3 stars. Well, sorry, I didn't give you any chance to say any reason.
I don't need a reason.
Okay.
No, I just think there was definitely some parts to it that didn't age well, and I think that's a thing to keep in mind for, like, a film's quality. Like, you could watch Prisoner of Azkaban now and feel like it was made pretty recently. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, I'm going to give it 3 stars. It's the same with Stefan. I'd like to give it 5, but for me, it's just structure-wise. It's probably that they're too faithful to the novel, and so it makes it kind of that episodic or meandery feel, especially in the first act. A little bit in the first act, in the first half of the second act. And the plot really, with the Sorcerer's Stone, I don't feel is that strong. But
I think that gets to the fact that Rowling was still trying to figure out her craft as well.
Yeah, true. I think the thing that saves it for me is just those iconic moments, like all the things that coming to Hogwarts for the first time, and then leaving Hogwarts at the end, all the stuff that you have to do. But it did it first, and it's kind of iconic in your mind because of that.
Yeah.
So, okay. So, star ratings for Prisoner of Azkaban, Mark.
4 stars. I mean, if I did half stars, I'd bump it to 4.5. But you know, my rules. So I'm going to say 4 stars. And to me, it was just, again, I finished watching Sorcerer's Stone, and I was thinking, oh, I got to go through this again. But then putting on Azkaban, and it was just such a refreshing experience visually, storytelling wise, acting as well. I mean, I think Radcliffe, Watson, Grint, the others, they did a fine job as 11-year-olds when they made a film as 11-year-olds, but it's so much better, so much more engaging, so much more heartfelt, and it just really, I could see why, it, as you were saying, Aaron, it's your favorite film of the franchise, and why it is generally regarded as the best film of the franchise. A rare case where, the sequel is the best, and not even the first sequel, but the second sequel, and then it's all downhill from there. Well, but a lovely ride. Stefan?
I'd have to say a 5. Definitely the best out of all the Harry Potter films. And, like, they elevated it. They kind of, like, expanded on it without taking too much out of, like, what they built. Mm-hmm. I will say when I first saw it, I was kind of, like, really thrown back because, like, this does not feel like the Harry Potter I know. Mm-hmm. But I think as an adult, like, I much prefer seeing Prisoner of Azkaban than Sorcerer's Stone. Because Sorcerer's Stone's, like, it's pretty much a kid's film. It's like a family-friendly film. The third one you could watch as a kid, as a teenager, as an adult, and still get something out of it.
Yeah, the first couple, I feel, have kind of really low stakes, like very kid-level stakes. And then the third one, I feel, is where it really hits its stride. And, so I'm going to give it 5 stars, too. It's honestly one of my favorite movies, if not maybe my favorite movie. Like Cuarón's direction and just the visual style of it. I love those just constantly moving in or out, or that dynamic camera. And
just kind of learning more about, like, his style and seeing, like, the movies that he's done before and afterwards.
Yeah, Gravity really, is great. Even
Gravity's amazing.
It's just an experience. And he has this sense to them of he always has a track on the emotional journey. Like Gravity is just the bare bones thing of she's just dealing with the loss of her child and her setting foot on the ground when you haven't seen Earth this entire time. And then like this really, I think it's a really low angle shot of her just standing up. It just hits you in this way that he's great at doing. Like I don't know how you get the craft to do that, but he's amazing at doing that, of just taking such a simple story, and this is a not quite as simple as Gravity, but it's pretty simple plot of he's got this killer after him, and you don't learn till the end that he's actually not the bad guy, and there's this hope for this future he could have with his godfather. But it's a very soulful movie, and it's
way more emotion.
And it's also got that other element to it of it being a depression and anxiety allegory that I think just depthens it more than, and I'm sure Cuarón just latched right onto that to give it some depth. But like the other ones are great as stories, but like this can do something for people. Like it as they talk about things in this, and I've watched it specifically when I've had anxiety things for that purpose, and the lines that they say in it, like even like Dumbledore at the ceremony, like you always have to remember to turn on the light, and then he waves his hand and the candle comes back on. And just every line in there, you can see they've tailored it to not follow the book religiously, but to give that tone of what that story needs. And I think that's the biggest thing that Cuarón brings to it. And of course the writers, because they wrote it, but I'm sure he had a hand in tailoring that he brings that emotional journey to it and that artistic sense to pull it off. And I really feel it functions on multiple levels, and it makes it, like you just said, have that standalone quality. So 5 stars. It's an amazing movie. Like, and I've tried not to give 5 stars to things, but I have to give it to this one. But in fact, I think I gave The Dark Knight like 4 or 4.5. So.
I was about to say, you do have the half-star option on this, so you can say 4.5, or you can say 4.
It's got to be 5.
3/4, but
yeah. This comes down to a favorites thing, but yeah.
Is this the highest ranking you've given to a movie on the podcast?
I think I've given other 5s.
You give another 5s.
Yeah.
But you just don't want to give every film we do a 5. Unfortunately, it helps that we've done some films that are not deserving of 5 stars.
Yeah, that's true.
Objectively bad movies.
Throw Mama from a Train.
Well, I would say objectively bad. It's just objectively not
good.
pinnacle films. So
Yeah.
like Stranger on a Train, good Hitchcock. Is it his best? It's like close to, but not quite. So
Okay, so our next episode is going to be Groundhog's Day and Edge of Tomorrow, and our guests will be Christian Macias and Karina Acevedo. So, yeah, Stefan has a lot of dealings with Christian. So
He's my buddy.
Yep. So that'll be a fun one. It's going to be, and Mark is unfortunately not going to be with us for that one.
Uh-oh.
So I'm going to have the crazy task of keeping up the timeline, and it's with Groundhog's Day. So
Edge
we'll
of
see what
Tomorrow.
happens. And Edge of Tomorrow,
Oh,
which
gosh.
I haven't seen all the way through. So
well, after you do that, then I'm going to increase my demand for pay.
from one paper laptop to 2 paper laptops.
This was a good primer for a time travel episode.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
that's true. If you'd like to get access to bonus features and deleted clips from CRISS and our sister show Facets of Story, please support us on Patreon at patreon.com/Transcend Entertainment. That's TRANSCEND Entertainment. And that's it for today's Crisscross Cinema Podcast.
But you wouldn't clap yet, because making something disappear isn't enough. You have to bring it back.
Crisscross.